burn that
Anytime.
anytime. And this is
This
called
is a menorah. This is a subset. In other words, all Chanukias are menorahs, but not all menorahs are Chanukias. Remember your Venn diagrams?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a menorah, but it's a special kind because it has the additional sockets.
menorah has 7. This has 8.
Before you move on.
The standard menorah used year-round for whatever purposes has 7. In the temple, in the ancient temple, there was an instruction to keep that thing lit all the time. And the structure was they used oil lamps, but the oil lamp had a wick that ran outside the building where the oil vat was. So the oil was drawn into these places where the wick was allowed to burn. You can try this at home. No, I'm serious. Try this at home. Take any oil, take some olive oil, put it in a container. You can buy floating wicks and simply light that. You'll see it. It's a wonderful light. Put water below it so it'll extinguish when you want it to. But basically that's the idea. They had cups about that size. I mean, the actual menorah described in the Torah that was used in the temple had each socket was about that big, and they were filled with oil. But the oil was derived from other sources, behind it or various structures. That's what I meant to bring. So it's your fault. I forgot to bring these, Claire. I meant to bring some of our oil lamp Chanukiah. So that'll be for another time. The standard was to keep that burning all the time. And that led to some confusion because in the 10 not the 10, but basically thinking the commandments for the Shabbat or the Sabbath, we're not allowed to kindle any fires. That's one of the rules. It's considered work and therefore not allowed on the Sabbath day. But in the temple, there are instructions that if the fire in the menorah go out, go relight it. So we're allowed to do things that God says, do this, even though it violates what we're supposed to do out in the rest of the world. But in His holy temple, God said, so therefore I do it. It's one of those things that gets us very confused. So, yes, God gets to make the rules and set His own agenda on them. Yes?
One time, and it was in this song, is the word Maccabees.
Mm-hmm.
In my small
Oh, yeah.
knowledge, that's the only time you've mentioned the Maccabees. And when I think of what little I know about Hanukkah, the Maccabees play a large part in there. Is that a wrong assumption?
No.
Or are
You're
you using the Babylonians and the Syrians instead of Maccabees, and the Maccabees were just a subgroup of them?
No. The Maccabees were the Jews.
Jews.
The
Okay,
Syrians were
that's
the bad
it.
guys.
Okay, that's what I
Okay,
know.
let me tell you the story, the rest of the story.
Let's get it right, yeah.
Okay, the name of the family, Judah, Shimon, and Jonathan and Jonah, there were 7 brothers. Has nothing to do. Actually, no. There were 4 brothers. The father, Mattathias, and they gathered a following that was huge. Judah was the one that became the most famous. Judah Maccabee. He was called the Maccabee because in Hebrew the word makav means a hammer, and so they were called the Maccabim in Hebrew, the hammers, because they were bringing the blows of the insurrection to the Syrians as if by the blow of a hammer. And so they were given that name. It wasn't their family name. They were called the Hashmonaim. They were the Hasmoneans, I suppose is the easiest transliteration. Their dynasty lasted for several hundred years, and the last of the Hasmonean kings was killed a long time later, and that was the end of Jewish sovereignty under Rome. But the Maccabees was the name given to those people. So if you were to talk to any Jewish kid going to good Sunday school and ask who fought the war against the bad people during Hanukkah, he would say the Maccabees, and probably know the name Judah Maccabee, simply because he was one of the brothers. Yes?
Now, certain Christian Bibles have apocryphal books called 1st and 2nd Maccabees.
True.
What do Jews think about those books? Are they?
They're fun to read.
Are they
Um,
apocryphal to you also?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
They're not part of the canonized books of the Bible. The books of Maccabees describe the events, but we don't know who wrote it. We sort of know, but we're not sure, and God is left out of it. In the book of the Maccabees, there's no mention of God, and God is not given credit. There was a problem for the rabbis of the ancient world because the people were coming up with a holiday without them. And how can you have that? Imagine if your people celebrated something without talking to you about it. So the rabbis seized on the idea of the miraculous oil. The people had a holiday, they talked about the oil, but it was a story. They really were celebrating like an Independence Day. It was a day on which they had overthrown the despotic rulers. And so, when the rabbis rewrote the story, the book of Maccabees was pushed aside because it was a story of Jewish fists instead of God. In fact, today, there are people who say the modern state of Israel has no place because it wasn't a divine activity. And there are those who respond to that by saying, if you look at the condition of the Jewish people at the end of the Holocaust, that out of the ashes of that terrible time would arise a state of Israel. If there's need for proof of any kind of a miracle, that has to be it. But no, there are those who say that it shouldn't be. And similarly, there are people who discount the importance of Hanukkah. But the rabbinic play on it is that it was a miracle, a God-mediated miracle. And we don't have any argument with that, but the apocryphal book of Maccabees is not part of our literature, our canonized books.
I always wondered about that because to me, Hanukkah is like the festival of joy.
It is a festival of joy, a festival of lights, but it was made more only because as a foil to Christmas. But you guys really make out great this year. You get in on all the after Hanukkah sales. Yeah.
I don't think you read this week, I'm sure it's something you've already believed, but you see the Pope has now said that Jews can go to heaven.
Want me to tell you a story? I'll tell you a story. It has to do just before the breakup of the Roman Empire into the Holy Roman Empire and the Byzantines. The Pope decreed that it was time to build a new cathedral around Istanbul. And the way you raise money was by selling indulgences. The sale of indulgences got you out of hell. It got you a better chance of getting a ride in the chariot to heaven. And when the Pope's emissaries approached the Jewish community of Istanbul, they said, why would we want to contribute monies for, A, we don't have a belief system that includes heaven or hell, and we certainly won't benefit by the presence of a big cathedral in our neighborhood. But pressure was brought to bear, and wanting to be good citizens, they said, all right, tell you what. And it took them, they gathered up virtually their entire treasury and agreed to make that massive contribution to the cause if and only if the Vatican would support a contract whereby the Jews would have exclusive rights to hell. This was such an absurd proposal that nothing was done about it on the spot. They went back to Rome, talked about it, and decided if those stupid Jews want to own hell, let them have it. And the deal was struck, and the cathedral was gotten underway. It didn't take long before they realized the oops. Suddenly, without the threat of hell, the flow of money with indulgence purchases dried up to nothing. The entire Holy Roman Empire found out that the Jews are the only ones now that can go to hell. And what a sport that was, because we don't believe in it. Hell was sold back. at a considerable profit. This is a factual and actual story. Not widely circulated in the Vatican Times, but I'm pleased to know that now it's okay now. Okay, any other?
No.
This has nothing to do with Hanukkah, but do all rabbis in the service, is not most of your presentation lyrical, and you just have such a beautiful voice, and I can't imagine a rabbi that would just not be able to carry a tune in a bucket.
You're there. He was a cantor first.
Well,
Oh, you had to tell. I am one of two right now in the city rabbi cantors. I started out on the musical side and then decided to go to the dark side. Got that initial, and got the additional initial in my monogram. It was a thing to do. I mean, I was almost there, but the downside is, before I could make random quips. Now when I say anything, people think they have to listen. And, well, except people who have gotten to know me. But the importance to me was to add that additional piece of knowledge, and I studied, quite a bit for it. The general style of services in a synagogue is for the rabbi to be the one who talks and the cantor to be the one who sings, and they don't mix. Some rabbis think they're cantors, and some cantors try to do the rabbinic thing. It doesn't work out well when there's one of each in the place. But not that there would ever be controversy between members of the clergy. So, some synagogues have a lot of music, some have a lot of, it varies. We're each on our own. We do not have a diocese. We don't have a central authority that tells us what we must do. Although around the world, the same liturgical approach to a festival will happen. So on any particular Shabbat or Sabbath or festival, we will all read from the scriptures the same material. And
Like our lectionary that we share with other Protestants.
yeah, I would imagine so. I don't know, I'm not authority on that. So in that sense, we all have the same thing. So if I were to wander about the world, I could walk into a synagogue anywhere, and it would be the same stuff. The substance would be the same. The sounds, the tunes, the interpretations, the talking might veer off in widely ranging different directions. But the liturgical part, we are very liturgical because we're not smart enough to keep up with the variety through all of the year. So we keep it all the same. We find that even by doing the same words week in, week out, people still have to read it. The memory is enhanced by the music. A lot of our prayers would be lost if we didn't sing them, because they have a tune and a rhythm. How many of you could recite the Star-Spangled Banner, for example, without the melody? That melody sort of drives the words. And so we found that almost all synagogue services will be done with a melody. That melody may vary slightly from place to place, and the skill with which it's delivered, some with choirs, some with just a cantor. But, I don't know, did I over-answer your question?
no. So the rabbi does all the speaking and the cantor does all the...
Talking, singing, yeah.
Yes.
And if one of them is absent, the other will try to do both jobs. And so now I have to do both, and I finally found a rabbi and a cantor who like each other. So,
Do you decorate your homes at Hanukkah?
excuse me?
Do you decorate your homes at Hanukkah?
Oh, yeah.
Like a Hanukkah tree or Hanukkah bush maybe?
Hanukkah bush is George with a hand, one of these. The Hanukkah, the December dilemma, as we call it, with all of the hype and the songs and the music that are so beautiful in the air, it's hard for Jews to grow up in the vacuum of not knowing that there is this other stuff going on out there, including Kwanzaa now. So we don't hide from it, but Christmas is not ours. We have a holiday, the one that I mentioned before, Tabernacles, when we do massive decorations, and that's when there are parties and parades in Israel, on this holiday we call Sukkot, that is known as Tabernacles, I believe.